My name is Vathari Son. I hold the rank of liaison commander among the Kalani people, which is a polite way of saying I was trained to talk, not to fight. I was posted to the Allied station Cradle of Echoes to oversee trade negotiations between three species who had learned, over many generations, to live beside one another in peace. The Kalani, the insectoid Vreth collective, the aquatic Dorvan sovereignty. We were not warriors, we were neighbors. I am recording this memory log so that someone, somewhere, will know what happened in the Lithara system. Not the version that will appear in military reports or diplomatic archives, the real version. The one that still makes my hands tremble when I think about it. It began 6 days before the end. The Harrow Dominion arrived without warning. Over 200 warships dropped into our system like a net falling over still water. They destroyed our small defense flotilla in a matter of hours. It was not a battle, it was an execution. By the time the fires went dark, the Dominion held total control of the sky above Lithara Prime, and 11 million civilians on the surface below had nowhere to run. Our station survived only because we were not worth the ammunition. The Cradle of Echoes was a diplomatic platform, not a fortress. We had no weapons that could scratch a Dominion cruiser. We were, to them, an afterthought. Something to collect later. I authorized a distress signal on every Allied frequency we could reach. It went out on the first day, and never stopped broadcasting. For 5 days, the only answer was static. I stood on the comms deck each morning and listened to that static the way you listen to rain when you know the river is rising. It was the sound of no one coming. The nearest Allied fleet was over 40 days away. Everyone on the station knew the math. We did not speak of it, but we knew. Refugees came up from the surface in battered shuttles, mostly children, wounded civilians, and elders, too frail to survive the chaos below. The station was designed for 4,000 people. Within days, we held nearly 14,000. The air recyclers groaned under the strain. Water was rationed to half cups. The medical bay spilled out into the corridors, and the corridors smelled of fear. I did what Kalani do when death is certain. I opened a memory log, our ancient tradition of preserving the thoughts of the dying, so that future generations can feel what was felt and know what was lost. I sealed my first entry with steady hands and a voice I did not recognize as my own. Among the survivors, 3 people stayed closest to me during those final days. Fleet Commander Rethka was the highest-ranking military officer still breathing. He was Dorvan, old and enormous, confined to a mechanical suit that let him move outside water. He had 9 patrol ships left under his command, all of them too damaged to fight anything larger than a shuttle. But he refused to surrender them. He said a Dorvan does not die hiding. Hive Speaker Chikri was a Vreth diplomat. She was terrified, though she hid it behind perfect protocol and formal language. She kept asking me to draft terms of surrender. She believed negotiation was the only path that kept the civilians alive. I understood her reasoning. I could not agree with it. The Harrow Dominion did not take prisoners. They took slaves. And then there was Metha, a Kalani child, no older than 7 in human years. She had arrived on one of the refugee shuttles with no parents and no explanation. I took her under my care because no one else could. She was small and quiet, and had a habit of pressing her face against the observation windows, watching the stars as if she expected something wonderful to appear. She asked me once, in that clear and simple way that children speak, when the sky soldiers were coming. I realized she had heard the old Kalani legend of the Ashayari, the ancient protectors who came from beyond the stars when all hope was gone. I told her gently that the Ashayari were only stories. She looked at me with those wide, luminous eyes and said, "Stories come from somewhere." I did not have an answer for that. On the 5th day, the Dominion commander made his move. His name was Kravex Thol, and he held the rank of subjugator general. He broadcast a message across the entire system. His voice was calm and unhurried, the voice of someone who had done this many times before. He gave us 1 planetary rotation to surrender unconditionally. If we refused, he would begin orbital bombardment of every major population center on Lithara Prime. He listed the cities by name, one after another, as if reading items from a menu. We held a council meeting. Rethka refused to surrender. Chikri begged for reason. I sat between them and thought about 11 million people looking up at a sky full of enemies, and I could not find a single word that felt adequate. During that meeting, someone mentioned a human cargo freighter called the Bridget Cleary. It had been docked at our station when the attack began. In the first hours of chaos, it fled the system at full speed. Rethke dismissed it with a wave of his massive hand. Humans, he said, a minor species, cargo haulers. They had joined the galactic community only 30 years ago, and had mostly kept to themselves, traders, explorers, a few cultural exchanges. They had no treaty with us, no obligations, no reason to care. They ran, he said, as anyone would. I remembered a human I had met once, years earlier. A trader with a loud laugh and a strange drink he called whiskey. He told me a saying from his world that my translator struggled to process. Something about cavalry always arriving at the last moment, and that being the whole point of cavalry. I did not understand it then. I barely remembered his face now. It did not matter. Humans were far away and few in number. They were not coming. The final hours passed like a slow dream. Chikri came to me alone and confessed that she had already sent a private surrender message to the Dominion. They rejected it. Kravex Thol wanted a public surrender, broadcast across the system, so every species watching would see us kneel. Chikri wept in the Vreth way, a low harmonic keening that resonated in my chest. I held her forelimbs and said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Rethke ordered his 9 ships into a line between the Dominion fleet and the planet. It was a gesture, nothing more. They would last seconds against 200 warships. But he said it was the Dorvan way, and he asked me to add his name to my memory log. I did. The clock reached 0. The Dominion fleet began to shift into bombardment formation. Kravex Thol sent one final message. "Your silence is your answer," he said. "So be it." I sealed what I believed would be my last memory log entry. I spoke to the future. I said we were 3 peoples who lived together, and we would die together, and I asked whoever heard this to remember that we did not break. And then, every sensor on the station screamed at once. I will never forget the sound. Every scanner, every array, every passive detector shrieking with data that should not have existed. Massive distortions in subspace, not from the direction of the Dominion fleet, but from behind us, from the deep void between stars, from a region of empty, silent nothing, where no ship had any reason to be. I turned to the observation window, and I saw the void tear open. Ships began dropping out of faster-than-light travel, not smoothly, the way Allied vessels arrive, with gentle deceleration and controlled grace. These ships ripped into real space like fists punching through a wall. White fire streaked across the darkness, one after another, then in clusters, then in a wave. I did not recognize them. They were dark-hulled, angular, and blunt. No smooth Kalani curves, no Vreth hive geometry, no flowing Dorvan lines. These ships looked like they had been built by people who expected to be hit and had decided in advance that they would keep going anyway. A sensor technician cried out a species identification from the transponder codes. I heard the word, and I did not believe it. Humans, 60 warships, a full combat task force designated Iron Veil, led by a dreadnought carrier called the UNS Thermopylae, cruisers, destroyers, frigates, and escort carriers, all in tight formation, all moving with a speed and coordination that Admiral Rethke later called mathematically insane. The Bridget Cleary had not run. She had run toward help. Her captain had pushed the engines past every safety limit, reached a human deep space relay, and screamed into the void that millions of civilians were about to die. The United Nations Star Navy mobilized a full task force within hours. They plotted a course through unstable space that any Allied navigator would have called impossible. They crossed 190 light-years in 5 days. The human fleet broadcast on an open channel. The voice belonged to Rear Admiral Constance Mbeya. Her message was directed at the Dominion, and it was short. Harrow Dominion vessels. This is Rear Admiral Mbeya of the United Nations Star Navy. You are engaged in the unlawful siege and threatened bombardment of a civilian population. You will withdraw immediately, or we will remove you. You have 60 seconds to comply. There will be no second warning. Kravex Thol was not afraid. He outnumbered them 3-1. He had conquered species far more powerful than these latecomers. He ordered his fleet to engage. I expected the humans to maneuver, to keep their distance, to use their speed. Instead, the entire human formation accelerated directly into the Dominion fleet. They closed to ranges that any Allied tactician would call unthinkable, and they opened fire with everything they had. In 2 hours, it was over. I will not describe the details of what I saw. I am a diplomat, not a soldier, and the specifics belong in military logs, not memory logs. But I will say this: the Dominion fleet, 200 warships strong, broke. They scattered. They fled. And the humans pursued with a calm, methodical precision that I found more unsettling than fury. Kravex Thol's flagship went dark. His retreat order came too late for most of his fleet. On the surface of Lithara Prime, Dominion ground forces, cut off from support, began laying down their arms. I was weeping. Everyone on the command deck was weeping. Kalani, Vreth, Dorvan, all of us holding on to each other as if we might float away if we let go. Matha appeared beside me, tugging my hand, and she looked up at me with those shining eyes and said, "The sky soldiers came. Before the debris had cooled, human medical ships docked with our station. Their doctors treated our wounded. They brought water, food, air scrubbers, and generators. A human medic examined Matha, gave her something to eat, and called her a word my translator rendered simply as warmth. I was brought aboard the Thermopylae to meet Admiral Mbeya. I expected a towering figure, a warrior carved from stone. Instead, I met a woman of average height, with tired eyes and gray in her hair. She asked about the civilians first. She asked about the children. She did not mention the battle unless I did. I asked her the question that had been burning in me since the moment her fleet appeared. Why? Humans had no treaty with us. No alliance. No obligation. The Lithara system meant nothing to them strategically. They risked 60 warships and thousands of their people for strangers they had never met. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she told me about a human idea. Not a law or a treaty, but something much older. She said humans have a phrase: "I am my brother's keeper." She said her species spent most of its history failing to live up to those words, looking away, while others suffered, arriving too late, making excuses. She said those failures left scars so deep that when the Bridget Cleary's distress signal reached them, when they heard that millions of civilians were about to be destroyed, there was no debate. The fleet mobilized in hours. Volunteers had to be turned away. She looked at me and said, "We did not come because of a treaty, Commander. We came because you were dying, and we could reach you in time. That is all the reason we have ever needed." I have thought about those words every day since. The Galactic Archives classify humans as a moderate-tier species, with limited territory and a fragmented culture. Nowhere in any file, any record, any database, is there a classification for what I witnessed in the Lithara system. I do not think such a classification exists. The closest word in my language is Asheyarin, those who come from the void when hope is gone, the sky soldiers from the old legends. I think the legends were never about the Kalani at all. I have reopened my memory log, not for the dead this time, but for the living, and for everyone who will come after. I want them to know what I know now. They are loud, the humans. They are strange. They drink things that would poison most species, and laugh about it. Their history is full of contradictions, full of darkness and light in equal measure. They are not perfect, and they would be the first to tell you so. But when the void was darkest, and the silence was absolute, and every one of us had accepted that no help was coming, they came. 60 warships, across 190 light-years, for people they did not know. Remember the humans. Whatever else you remember, remember them.